Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm back with a video. I think I'm going to start a series called If I'm So Smart, Why Ain't I Rich? I want to address a couple of stories that have come up in the news lately. And one of them is the notion that a lot of really, really smart people, had it completely wrong about Donald Trump. So, Donald Trump said, I'm going to solve the problem with the Ukraine war in one phone call. In an hour, I'll get it done. Whatever it was, an hour or one phone call, I'll get it solved. And I called bullshit. So, Donald Trump becomes president, and the hour or the one phone call turns into what he's had four phone calls with Vladimir Putin, presumably, and he's been going back and forth. Will I send arms? No, I'm going to cut off arms. We got to put this war to an end. We're going to just end all this. We're going to cut off the funding for it. The Republicans cut off the funding for it, and the hell with them, and this sort of thing. And I'm just saying it's all bullshit. This is the intention is to bring down Russia and China and the BRICS and everything that stands in the way of U.S. hegemony. So I just call bullshit. This anybody who had any faith in Trump, they were fooled. I made a post about this. I said I thought I have no military education at all. I've been a pacifist all my life. As long as when I was 13 years old, I read the biography of Albert Einstein, and I thought, he's my hero. Albert Einstein and the Buddha are my two heroes. These are the two intellectual and spiritual giants, from in my life. And Albert Einstein, just said, this is, no, he said to FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, the Nazis are planning to build an atomic bomb, and we're going to have to do something. We need to build a bomb before the Nazis do. And he was unfortunately wrong about that the Nazis didn't have the wherewithal to actually do that. But by creating an atomic weapons program, everything that has transpired since then, the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, the Cold War, the whole doomsday scenario, everything that's happened since then has been a result of that mistake that Einstein, he correctly saw the possibility, the threat, but look what it turned into. So anyway. But people are saying, and these are military experts, and they're very smart people. They're completely. I'm not nowhere near in my league, but the thing is, what people you listen to what people say, and then you watch what people do. So there's a saying, don't listen to what people say, watch what they do. It's said that. Who is it? John Mitchell, who was the Attorney General under the corrupt Nixon administration, and Nixon had his own very serious problems, and eventually he was kicked out of office. He was forced to resign under threat of impeachment because it wasn't because he bombed Cambodia. It was because of some third-rate, burglary against the Democratic Party. So the whole notion of why Nixon was forced to resign is based on specious assumptions. But in any case, his Attorney General, John Mitchell, said, don't listen to what we say, watch what we do. And I just found out recently that actually it was the Chinese philosopher who apparently he was the first one to say that. Don't listen to what people say, watch what they do. And too many of these experts, who've been in the business for decades, actually bought into the idea that Donald Trump was going to deliver, peace or some kind of accommodation. And to which I say, don't listen to what Trump says, watch what he does. Look at who this person is. He started off his career. He's the child of a slumlord and a real estate shyster in New York. And his first mentor, his first real mentor, was Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn was he was like a right-hand man to Joe McCarthy. He was, witch hunting for communists, which is, it's an absolute no-no. Heaven forbid that people should have free health care and be guaranteed a house and guaranteed an education and guaranteed health care. Heaven forbid that our wonderful free market system would make that a possibility, for not merely a possibility, but this is a deliberate intention of our society to create a decent life for its citizens. Heaven forbid. And the people who run our country, I call them the real owners, is what George Carlin used to call them. He said they have no intention of helping the American people. They just promise after promise after promise, and they break them, and the American people fall for it every single time. And so you've got this MAGA movement, and Donald Trump is promising all this stuff, and of course he had. What intention do you think he had, or even if he had a modest amount of intention, it's grossly outweighed by the people who pay him, who is, the Adelsons, who pay him $100 million to overlook the fact that he's supplying Israel with the weapons to commit genocide, and people expect something better from him. It's just I don't understand it. And so here I am. I just look at this guy, look at his career, who he was. He had this Trump University, which he was fleecing people for thousands of dollars to become a real estate expert the way he is, and they lost money. It was all a scam, and that is Donald Trump. And for anybody who voted for him, either in 2016 or 2020 or 2024. They're fooling themselves. They don't look at the person. Forget what people say, watch what they do. So that's the first thing that I wanted to talk about. And the second thing is that there was this whole trope about, Russia invaded Ukraine unprovoked. And at the time, I got phone calls from good friends of mine. These are, they're good people. Their hearts are in the right place, but they haven't been watching events as they actually happen. All they do is listen to the major media who's lied to them in war after war after war after war. Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Iraq again, and now in Ukraine. And they said, Russia is, they're going to have to fight with shovels. They're going to have to take their chips out of washing machines. There's no way that they can win. Biden says we're going to turn the ruble into rubble. Wrong, 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 wrong. These people are fools and egotists, and they think that they fool themselves, and they get the media to lie for them to get the people to go along with it. And I said to my friends at the time, you don't understand. Since 2014, Joe Biden and Osama Obama staged a coup in Ukraine using the grandchildren of the Nazi collaborators of World War II. That is a fact. The Azov Battalion, Azov Battalion, Adar Battalion, Tornado, these are all basically fascist organizations, and they were going around killing innocent people. They're really good at that, but when it came up to Russia, when Russia finally put its foot down and said, enough, we're not going to tolerate your systematic destruction of the people in eastern Ukraine who are part of your country. We tried to negotiate with you guys to give these people a fair shake. You refused to do it. You were arming yourselves in order to finish them off, and we intervened to prevent that. That is the reality. And as far as who's going to win this war, I was surprised because I kept criticizing, why is Putin rolling over to the United States? He rolled over in Libya and they were negotiating over Minsk and all these kinds of events. They were being extremely, what can I say, deferential to the American hegemonic, impulses. But what I didn't understand was that I think it was in 2002, when George W. Bush said, that arms control treaty, the ABM treaty, the anti-ballistic missile treaty, but we're going to get rid of that treaty and we're going to plan a first nuclear strike on your country. And Putin says, please don't do that. Please don't do that. And George Bush says, go F yourself. And so what I didn't understand was that the core Russian people who really deeply care about Russia, they would not allow their country to be destroyed by Wall Street and these vultures. And so they said, we're going to have to arm ourselves. And so over the course of over 20 years, they were rebuilding the military-industrial complex that they had actually dismantled when the Soviet Union fell. They said, let's not fight anymore. Let's have peace. Let's have, what do we call it, peaceful coexistence. But the West doesn't want any part of that. It's all, they call it peace through strength, which means we'll kill you, we'll strangle you, we'll do whatever we have to do, and that'll be what we call peace. In Rome, there was I think it was Tacitus who said, they call it a desert, they create a desert and they call it peace. That is U.S. foreign policy and the policy of Europe for the past several hundred years. So people who put their trust in Western foreign policy or believe anything that comes out of the major media, they're just, how naive can they be? Now, even many Russians were very naive about it. I have, Russian friends and acquaintances, and some of them actually bought into that. But because I understand the nature of this U.S. imperialism, I've known about it during the Vietnam War. I was a college kid, and I could see what was going on. I just thought, this is horrific. How can our country participate in this? How can I participate in it? And I made a conscious decision throughout my life that I was not going to do that. And yet, people go along with it, and we get into these stupid wars. And my friends call me and say, why did Russia invade Ukraine unprovoked? They don't know what they're talking about. And guess what? Russia secretly rearmed itself. They got themselves back off the floor where they'd been, crushed by the U.S. banking system, and they're thrashing Ukraine. And unfortunately for the Ukrainian people, their country is disappearing underneath their feet. Now, I just spoke with a friend of mine who lives in Ukraine, and this person said that most of the people in Ukraine are oblivious of what's going on. But this person understands the nature of the situation. The country is ruled by Nazis. That's the way it is. And Zelensky, he was elected on the basis of being the peace president. He was going to negotiate the peace terms based on the Minsk agreements, which Putin and what's her name, Angela Merkel and Francois Hollande and Petro Poroshenko had negotiated in 2014 and 2015. And they had no intention of following through on that. They were rearming Ukraine to the teeth. During Trump's administration, he was rearming them, and then he disowns it. He says, oh, the war would never have happened. Well, Donald, if you hadn't pumped all those weapons into Ukraine, the war wouldn't have happened. But because you did, that is the reason why the war happened. Now he's saying, he says all the time, if I had been president, the war wouldn't have happened. Really? And he expects people to believe it. And you know what? A lot of people do believe it. It's really unbelievable to me that people, they listen to these politicians, they don't look at their record, and that's where we end up. So I ask myself, if I'm so smart, why ain't I rich? Why is it that people who are considered to be experts couldn't see what was going on all this time? I'm just this, like minnow in an ocean of sharks, and it's pretty obvious to me. I can see what's going on. Well, why is that? It's because I look at things not on the surface level, but I look at things in context. I look at things in terms of the history. How did we get to this place? And if you go back step by step and you see 2014, a coup occurs in Ukraine. Why does that happen? Because the CIA was going in and brainwashing the Ukrainian people to give up their resistance to this to their natural affinity with Russia, because many of the people speak Russian. They're ethnic Russian. Many speak Russian. These rabid Russophobes in Ukraine had very little power, but the CIA and the deep state in the United States made sure to create an anti-Russia of this a country that was has been deeply aligned with Russia for centuries. Kiev, the capital, was the original capital of the Russian nation. And my own grandmother, and I've corroborated this with other people, from Russia. There was a saying, "You can ask your way to Kiev," it's like all roads lead to Rome. So if people don't understand why things are the way they are, it's because they haven't looked at the history. So and when I do my analysis, I look at the history. You have to look at the context. You can't just take things. It's just this thing. Ukraine is the ruble's going to turn into rubble. Oh, really? Well, the U.S. miscalculated. They didn't realize that Russia has had ups and downs with China, but they understand. China and Russia understand that Russia is it was like Ukraine is on the menu as the appetizer. Russia's the you could say the main course, and China is not just the main course. It's more than the dessert that's eating the whole pie at this point. And so Russia and and China united, and they realized what we need to create a phalanx, so to speak, a collection of countries around the world, whether it's Brazil or Iran or Egypt, other countries, and create a bulwark against this hegemonic impulse in the behalf of the West. So if we look at things from that point of view, then we can understand why things are the way they are. And I'll just mention that probably one of the best people that you can listen to, you should look him up. He's a personal friend of mine. We know each other. We've communicated in the past. Pepe Escobar, and he comes from Brazil, but he was a reporter for Asia Times for many years, and he understands Asian politics inside and out. He understands it probably better than almost anybody around. So you should try and find him. He was kicked off of Facebook, I think. He doesn't have a YouTube channel, but he's often interviewed on YouTube channels with people such as Judge Andrew Napolitano or Danny Haifong. And what's interesting about them, I'll just as a little bit of a side note, is that Judge Andrew Napolitano is a staunch libertarian, and he used to be on Fox News until they kicked him off. And people like Danny Haifong or Max Blumenthal are people who are from the left side of the political spectrum, like myself. And if there's anything hopeful about our situation, is that you have people either on the conservative right, like Andrew Napolitano or Scott Horton, who wrote a book called Provoked. And these are both from I would call it the conscientious right, who are willing to look things from a non-ideological point of view, but just to see things as they are. And then, as I say, you have people like Pepe Escobar, or Max Blumenthal, or Danny Haiphong, or Ben Norton, who has a show called the Geopolitical Economy Report, or Michael Hudson, or Richard Wolff, who are more on the left-hand side, but they understand things as they are. Michael Hudson, the economist, wrote a book called Super Imperialism back in 1970. He understood how the world actually works. So these are the people that you should be listening to. These are the people that I listen to. And although I certainly listen to experts like Andrei Martyanov, or Scott Ritter, or Daniel Davis, or Douglas McGregor, these are all very useful people to hear. These are experts, and they also have a good degree of objectivity. So if there's anything good that we can see coming out of this, is that there's a kind of consensus about the diagnosis of American imperialism and the empire, and something needs to be done to stop it. Because whether you're a socialist or a libertarian, you know you cannot run a country where you're treating the people as object of parasitism, where they're treated to be just get the money and the wealth and their education and their consciousness sucked out of them. And so that's what I want to say in this little rant of mine. So I'm calling this, "If I'm so smart, why ain't I rich?" And I'm actually borrowing that from a poet, a Zen poet named Philip Whalen, who I actually knew back in the day, and he wrote a poem talking about if you're so smart, why ain't you rich? And he was coming at it from a pure Zen point of view, where all we really have is this moment. But there was another a Russian filmmaker. I think his name is I'll say his name wrong. It's like Karan Karazanov, something like that. And he was on one of these Russian TV shows, and he says, "If we're so smart, why ain't we rich?" And he probably is a lot richer than I am, because he's a very successful movie maker. But the point I'm making here is that you don't necessarily need to have, and Andrei Martyanov said as much in a post that he made just today. He said, you don't really need to have a military or a scientific education. You just need to have some critical thinking and the ability to determine what the actual truth is. So that's basically what I have to say. And again, if you can support my channel, that'll be really great. And you can make a contribution through Substack, or I just updated my Substack contact information, so they said, okay, people can make a contribution through Substack, and of course through PayPal. I leave all this in the following this video. So that's all I have to say for now, and I'm going to be coming back. I've got another post that I want to make on the whole nature of the history of U.S. imperialism, and I'm going to be uploading that shortly. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. So thanks a lot for listening, and I will check back with you soon.